Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Circling Seattle Sports. I am Charles Hamaker, as always, with you with RJ from Emerald City Hockey. Once again, it's a little odd doing this during the day and the sun's in my eyes, so that's fun. It's night. Well, it kind of harkens back to yesterday's Kraken season opener that was during the day. So Kraken have begun their 2024-25 season, and I don't think anybody expected this to happen at this time. Just a day after you begin your year, the Kraken have given goaltender Joey Daccord a 5-year, $5 million contract. RJ and I were talking about some of the more minute details about this. I believe what his 10-team, 12-team no trade clause begins next year, so there's that. There's a signing bonus as well. Um, but nothing super crazy about this contract in terms of the details. RJ, just your thoughts about this. Welcome back. Obviously, great to have you here, but we'll get right into it, right? I mean, this is interesting for this to all happen when it's happening. Not necessarily why, everybody was really excited with what Joey did last year, but the fact of his last year in comparison to what his NHL resume looks like, this is all kind of dangerous, right? In a way, just your opening thoughts, I guess, on this before we get into the nitty gritty. Sorry to throw the word soup at you to begin this.
All good. No, thanks for having me back. Always happy to hop on here and talk hockey with you. So yeah, this caught me by surprise. I was not expecting to wake up to this news. The Kraken went and extended Joey Daccord. Right now, I figured they would probably take at least part of this season to see more what they had in him and to kind of get a larger sample size. They elect not to do that. They lock him in for 5 years, $5 million a year, which is I don't know. It's hard to explain what market value, I guess, is for a player like this because at the end of the day, he only has 61 NHL starts to his name. And so it's rare to see a guy locked up for this kind of term, given the limited sample size. Of course, he's looked good in those games, had a great year last year for the Kraken. And I think what it comes down to is that this is a risk the Kraken are taking. And that's, I guess, why I was surprised is because it is very risky. This is a risky extension for a goalie that just doesn't have a whole lot of games under his belt. He's looked good in the limited games he's had, but you lock in this number. And so, of course, there's the risk that he is worse than what we saw last season, but there's the potential reward of that he is as good as what we saw last season or potentially even better. And in that case, it's a steal.
And you talk about the sample size. I was curious about this because obviously, if you looked at just the NHL numbers, he's never played double-digit games outside of last year. Um, but if I went to his elite prospects, he's never played 50 games outside of last year. I mean, he had, if you go back to 2015, 16, in the USHL, he's got the Muskegon Lumberjacks. He played 48 games, but otherwise, it's like you hit this 35 mark. I'm not worried about if he can handle, well, no, that's not the point. Um, I don't know what I'm trying to say here. It's interesting to look at this, um, to look at his body of work here fully in his career. Obviously, I'm not taking a ton of stock in his USHS career, but it is, yeah, I think risk is the biggest way to label this with just one word, right? Because I mean, it was exciting. We all loved what we saw from him with the team's AHL affiliate, the Coachella Valley Firebirds, when he was there. Excellent just to watch him carry those playoff run. Well, yes, right, the one run. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I didn't really think too much about it. Kind of, as you know, when this stuff happens, you just focus on getting it out initially. But you look at it and it's I know I like to be optimistic. It's interesting. So before we get into that and the negativity, what do you like about this? Because to an extent, I don't think a ton of us were, but if you looked at this Kraken season before this, you're like, okay, Joey's on a contract year. He has arguably been the better goaltender. I don't know how much you need to argue. Um, and he's a guy who's younger than Philip Grubauer. He's exciting to watch him play the puck. All these things. It's nice to have, and he's a great guy. Like as you know, covering the guy, he's fun to be around. What do you like from this? Just to have him around, I guess, for 5 more years in addition to this season.
Right. And I think you kind of hit on it. So we'll get into the negative stuff later because overall, I don't like this extension. But what I do like about it, in a word, is Joey. I like him. I think that he worked very hard to get where he is. I mean, that's a fact. Like his father is a goalie coach and he has worked his butt off to get to this spot in his career. And so he's got a great story and he's an easy guy to root for too. Seeing the work that he puts in, day out. And then as you and I both know very well, you walk into that Kraken locker room as media, right? And you're looking for people to go talk to. You always want to go talk to Joey, right? Because he's always friendly, he's always happy, he's always, got a good story for you, right? And so it's going to be great to just have him around for another 5 years, 6 years now, really, 5 years beyond this one. And so that part of it, I really do like. And also, even just on the ice, I think he could be a legitimate NHL starter for the duration of this contract. I think he has that potential. I like what I've seen from him on the ice. And despite the limited sample size at the NHL level, you go back to his AHL career and he's done fantastic there. There is that background of a very good goalie. He is 28, but they tend to be late bloomers. So I do like Joey. That's the thing. I like the player. There are other contextual reasons I don't like this contract, but I do like the player. And if you are going to make a very risky bet on somebody like this, he's the guy I'd want to bet on just because he works so hard. He looks good on the ice and he's a fun guy off the ice.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, that's one thing I want to get straight is like they're obviously with the fan aspect of it, just thinking in that regard, it's like there could be folks who see RJ put out a great tweet about this, and it's kind of why I wanted to talk to him about it because he's obviously got thoughts put together regarding today's extension. You could look and be like, oh, you just don't like the guy, think he's not worth it. That's not necessarily the point. It's great to be around. It's not anything demeaning his character, who the person he is, all of that, or even the goalie he is on the ice. It's just there are multiple factors that go into this, and that's what we have to think about when we do this job. Yeah, I mean, it's been a lot of fun to watch him, like his ability to play the puck that dominated so much of what we talked about in the beginning of last year, right? Like people talking to to Hack, to the defenseman about Joey's ability to play the puck, about how he's like another defenseman back there, all that sort of thing, and just some of the highlight reels he was able to make. The Scorpion save comes up a bunch, right? The Winter Classic will obviously be something we'll remember, all of us, forever. But yeah, no, I mean, it's nothing bad about him. It's just a combination of things is makes this really fascinating. So what's the bad about this? You've touched on it. There's a little smirk there. Just the bad on this contract, whether it's the amount of money, the timing, again, a bit odd. I don't think any of us expected to see Kevin Weeks pop up tossing a fish this morning, and then using an apostrophe in the cord. I don't know why that started. TNT
I
posted.
bet that's autocorrect. He's
I
got the
hope
French
so.
autocorrect on
I
there, I'm
hope
sure.
so. But yeah, what makes you really kind of look at this and not like it?
Right. So I guess in short, I view this contract as a high risk, low reward gamble that Ron Francis is making here. And I just don't like how that math plays out. So we'll start with the timing. I think the timing is not ideal. So Joey Daccord, he had 1 year left on his deal prior to this signing this extension. So his contract ran through the rest of this season. And the Kraken could have waited up until this offseason to maybe try and get something done with him. He was an unrestricted free agent. He was set to be an unrestricted free agent, meaning he could sign anywhere. So that is the inherent risk with something like that, is that at the end of the season, he could go anywhere. And so you are worried about that. But I ask this question: would the price really have been that much higher had they waited and he had another good season? And I don't think it would have been all that much higher. Probably would have been higher if he had another year like he did last year. I think it's maybe $1 million higher AAV wise, maybe 1.5 million. I don't think it gets that high, because anything higher than that, and you're getting into the range of a UC Saros contract, or even like around Connor Hellebuck, right? Or the Linus Ullmark extension that he actually just signed today. You get into that range, but those goalies you're talking about, they are Vezina Trophy winners. They are top three goalies in the NHL consistently. And as good as Joey might be this season, I don't think he can't build up that much of a pedigree in just one more year. He would be a UFA, but I really doubt teams would go that much higher than 6.25, 6.5 on a 5 year deal, because that's the term as well, right? Goalie contracts can get risky with term. And so I just don't think it would be that much higher had they waited till the end of the season. And it seems like a low price to pay to see what you really have in a goalie with only 61 career starts. Then there's the risk of betting on Joey himself. And this is the part that concerns me the least, because as we just talked about, I like the player. I really do. But goaltending is an inherently volatile position. It just is. It's hard to predict goaltending. You look at some of the comparable contracts for a deal like this, and names like Cal Peterson, Ville Husso, Elvis Merzlikins on the maybe the bad side, and then like a Thatcher Demko or Linus Allmark as far as the good that can come out of it. And it's really hard to know which camp he'll go into, right? Because goaltending is so hard to predict. And the early indicators are good, but you could say the same for any of those five. And so, with such a volatile position, too, you look at the overall cap situation, the big picture, the downside of this deal potentially going wrong is much greater than the upside of it going well. If he does play like Demko or Allmark, right? Probably saves you $3 million or so in the cap hit, right? He might be paid eight or so if you let just kind of extend him year by year or whatever, right? Probably saves you that much surplus money, which is good. That's good to have, right? But if it turns out that he is really not a legitimate starter, or that he turns out like a Peterson or a Husso, right? Then it is crippling for your cap situation, given that you already have a Philip Grubauer contract on the books, which that's the elephant in the room. They've got to deal with that now too, because they've got a lot of money in the crease. And so the downside is potentially really bad on this.
Yeah, some of the key points that you've made are just like, you know, betting on, because that's what this is. This is a bet, right? To that this guy is going to play like he did for the majority of last year. There's some argument that he kind of went down as the season went out, but that Kraken season, that was a tough watch. Um, like betting on that guy, I've got no problem betting on that guy because his whole story is perseverance, right? That's what a lot of the headline and the talk will be with this extension. Like when people write about it, it's like he's had a great story to finally get this payday to an extent, right? It's fun. So on a guy like that, I have no problem betting on him. It's just like you said, like doing this right now, maybe even doing it around the deadline or mid-year, something like that, towards the end of the season would have made sense. You see him perform like he did last year or better, sure. Like, all right, like it is a season and a half, sure, but I feel a little more comfortable. And like I think what's important is also you mentioning that, like how much it would have gone up. Like if Joey Daccord has a Vezina winning season this year, awesome. Like great, but it's still largely unproven, right? Like I don't know. It is the big I go back to it. The risk aspect is so big. Like just and that risk is where I go to next. You touched on it, and I don't know if you've got more in that regard, but what's the best possible scenario with this? Like he is 28, like you said, his contract will end what in the 2030-31 season, if I'm correct. Like what's the best case scenario here? Because like you said, you're gonna have to do something with the other guy's contract. Which is it's you've got two pretty solid guys in terms of people in the crease. Like we have fun talking to those guys, but Philip Grubauer is 32. You're not gonna, I don't, unless he somehow, even if he did start to play to the level of that contract, I don't think you could keep him here like that. Like, anyway, what's the best case scenario with Joey? Because he's 28, like we've talked about, he's locked up now. Is the best case scenario him playing like he did for the majority of last year through, the main parts of that contract?
Yes, in short, yes. And I think the best case scenario is that he even can build a little bit off of what he did last year, do it over maybe some more games too, become a goalie that can play somewhere in the 50 or so game range. And maybe you're able to kind of phase Grubauer into a smaller role as he gets older. Because I think you look at Grubauer at this point, you look at aging curves, you look at what he's done the last few seasons. I think he's an average NHL goalie. That's just kind of what he is. And so the Kraken are going to rely on Joey to be a proper starter, at least the certain 1A in a tandem, particularly as that contract goes on. So I think that's the best case scenario. I think he's capable of it. he's shown good things so far. So I guess basically he could turn into a Thatcher Demko or a Linus Allmark, right? And you have your starter, you have your guy you can lean on to play 50, 55 games in a season. And then you make the decision about, do you keep Grubauer and have this very expensive goaltending tandem, or do you buy Grubauer out and maybe still have an expensive goalie tandem because you have to pay for his replacement plus the buyout cost? That's the other thing. It doesn't get a whole lot cheaper if you buy out Grubauer, because you still need to bring in his replacement. And if you go just bargain basement, league minimum type price for replacement, it puts that much more pressure on Joey to be that goalie and to play more games and all of that stuff, which I don't know that you want to do. But if he shows he's capable of it, I guess that's the best case scenario, is one where it allows you to buy out Grubauer because Joey plays so well, and you can bring in a very cheap replacement.
And then now I need you to go doom and gloom here. What's doomsday worst possible scenario here? Because this will kind of lead us into what I want to finish with, and talking about some of the contracts that, this team will have to deal with either at some point throughout the course of this season, or when we reach May and June and all that, or well, the off season. Sorry. Um, because yeah, like you've said earlier, you've got starting next year 10,900,000 in the crease each year for 2 years, and then Gruby becomes a free agent 27, 28. I mean, yeah, doom and gloomy. What's the
All
worst
right.
possible scenario
All
here?
right. So worst case scenario here, I think look no further than Cal Peterson. I think he actually might be the best comp for this contract. So Cal Peterson, young promising goalie. He was a fifth round pick out of Buffalo, but again, another later draft pick guy, was with a team then LA that was not the team that drafted him, but they viewed him as the future of their goaltending. And of course, they had Jonathan Quick on the team at the time, their franchise goalie, right? But he was getting old. He was going to move on. There's a lot of parallels here with the Cal Peterson situation. And so what the Kings decided to do was sign him to a contract. I believe it was in September, right before the 21-22 season started. So again, just like this contract, kind of a start of the season type signing, right? When he still had a year left. So they extend him and they give him a contract, 5 million AAV, 5 million a year. So they've got that in common as well. And at the time, Cal Peterson had played 54 NHL games. He'd started 50 games. Right now, Joey Daccord, 61 career starts. Pretty similar, right? Cal Peterson's career save percentage, 916. Joey Daccord's is, what is it? 907. So Peterson even had a little bit better numbers earlier in his career than Joey Daccord, but they were both coming off similar seasons too. Peterson was just coming off of a year which limited games, but he had the 13th best goals saved above expected in the league that year. Joey, he's coming off a season, he had the 15th best goals saved above expected in the season. So a lot of parallels here in these two goalies. What happened with Cal Peterson, though, again, he only had 50 games, 50 starts under his belt, right? Comes out the next season, 895 save percentage, looks a little worse. The next year, 868 looks pretty downright terrible, right? And the Kings ended up having to trade him and throw in major assets just to dump that contract. They were lucky the Flyers were there to take it on, but it became a massive albatross for them, and their goalie situation hasn't really recovered since. They've been scrambling in net ever since, trying to find the answer because of this contract that they signed. And so that's the worst case scenario for the Kraken, is that Joey Daccord, turns out it was kind of a 1 year aberration. He's really a backup level player, at best. And all of a sudden you have major problems in net because you have $10.9 million committed to two guys who neither of them are starting caliber. And you have to find a way to Kraken fans already know what this is like to an extent with Philip Grubauer, how difficult that contract would be to get rid of. Now you've got two of them, and that can be absolutely crippling for a team. So that's the worst case scenario. And the Kraken also just can't afford to be in that scenario too. And that's where I have a problem with this bet as well, because look, if you're stacked, if you're a cup contender like, Tampa, Florida, we've seen these successful examples before, you can have an expensive goalie tandem like this. I mean, the Kraken are set to now have the fourth most expensive goalie tandem in the NHL next year. And by the way, they're the only team in that range without like a star goalie, someone making 8+ mil, right? It's kind of two $5 million guys. And that's the situation they're in. If you are stacked in a cup contender, you can make that work. And we've seen that with Tampa and Florida. But that is not Seattle, because having that much money in net is going to prevent the Kraken from making additions elsewhere on this roster. And as we saw with their struggle to get under the cap to start the season, I mean, they still need to get rid of somebody to have flexibility, right? This team's basically capped out. And I think on the high end of projections, they're a wild card team. And so you're going to need to make additions to this team to make it a perennial playoff team. And having that much money in net is going to prevent you from doing that. And so that's okay if you're paying a goalie who's a legit starter in the NHL, or in the best case scenario with Joey, and you can deal with it. If he's anything less than that, you're in a really, really bad spot.
Yeah, and that you did a great job at talking about the additions here. So thank you for that. It's like a layup. I'm sorry, but I will go back talking to Cal Peterson. With the Kraken, you just have to think back to what was it, November 30th, 2022, 9-8 overtime win. Peterson, I think
Mm-hmm.
he came in relief of Quick, I believe, and he got put on waivers the next day. So I will always remember that. But yeah, so RJ lays out perfectly because, again, you have to separate it. As great of people and as fun as they can be, whether it's marketing, story wise, whatever, like that is a lot of money I'm looking at for a position that, like you said, they're neither of these guys are workhorse guys. Joey had to be that with Grubauer injured, and they didn't seem comfortable with, Chris Drieger taking up more than the one start I think he got in Calgary. I don't remember one start he got, right? Um, but is he going to be that guy like we talked about in the best possible scenario? We'll have to see that. We're put into a corner here, RJ. Um, like you said, with the additions here, unless Shane Wright comes out and is a superstar for multiple, is a superstar. Matty Beniers really bounces back. You get Andre Burakovsky back. It's going to take a lot of these guys on this current roster to play essentially like the best version of themselves for them to be more than a wild card team, right? And unless somehow Ryan Winterton comes out and is like the next coming, uh, yeah, I don't think those are coming internally, right? It's not like you've got an AHL roster that's stacked with guys who are fully ready. Like I love the prospect pool, but outside of bringing up like Ryan Winterton and a few guys who are fringe NHL players, what do you have in Coachella Valley? You've got the young guys now. Those are guys who are like a step or two away, right? So this was something I thought about immediately after I put out all of our stuff on Joey. You've got Yanni Gord, Brandon Tanev, Will Borgen, Josh Mahura as UFAs, and then you've got Riker Evans and Ty Cartier as RFAs. Uh, you're gonna have to likely see three of those guys go, which is fine. I mean, if you think about the factors of age and money, like which are big in the sports world, right, with contracts and such. But I imagine you want to keep Ty Cartier around. He's not going to get a payday, but you want to keep him around. He's a guy who's been consistent, who's been a helper for you. And then Riker Evans, who, is very solid and is very young. Like, how backed into a corner are you if you're Ron Francis in this team? Because, you know, if even if Ron gets fired, you're kind of the next guy who comes in, next person who comes in, sorry, is still backed into a corner. You can't bring in new guys. You signed the Vince Dunn extension, what was it, last year? The Montour deal's big, Stevenson, etc. Adam Larson re-signed. Jamie Alexiak's on the book this year and next year for 4.6 mil. Like, how backed into a corner is this team?
The flexibility is certainly reduced. And we know there were questions going into this offseason, right? Of, okay, you have to kind of rebuild the blue line because, Larson hadn't been extended yet. You hadn't brought in Montour. There was a lot of the whole goaltending situation, right? That was up in the air. And so Francis, for better or worse, has answered those questions as far as what they're going to do. And from a long-term perspective, too, look, he's kind of doubling down on the team that he has and the team that he's built. And we'll see this season how good that team actually is. But if it's not good enough, if it's not a playoff team, there's not a whole lot of areas to add at this point now. And like it or not, this is the team that you've got. They're pretty much capped out for the time being. And you look at the other teams around the league that are in that situation, and they're Stanley Cup contenders. Those are the teams that are struggling to get under the cap and that are dealing with this sort of thing. And the Kraken are kind of alone in that situation where they've also spent all their money, but they're just fighting to be a wild card team. And so, especially with this deal, with the Larson deal, with Stevenson, Montour, these deals together, they are risks, right? And they could save Ron Francis's job. But if they don't, if this team is not good enough, their next GM is going to seriously lack flexibility. And so everything that Francis is doing now has the potential to hamper the ambitions of this organization for a long, long time and give his successor a very hard time. So again, if the gambles all work out, it's brilliant. It's a master stroke. He's figured this all out and he saved his job. But the downside is very bad.
Yeah, and I mean, there are some guys that I could certainly imagine them moving on, who are free agents in a few years. Like, I don't imagine Jaden Schwartz is
Mhm.
a Kraken for the next 2 years. I'd like to see Oliver Bjorkstrand around. That's an interesting one, though. He is 29. Andrei Burakovsky is a guy who, like, unless he has a good year this year, did they say, screw it, we messed up here? Like, there are guys who will like have a year, but that also depends on their play. Even you can't. Are you going to start paying teams to say, "Hey, we messed these contracts up. Here's a pick. We need a majority of this off our books," right? So it's well, and even I don't know how much of a story this is, and we got to get you out of here. Jordan Eberle is on the books through 25, 26. He's your captain. Is he just going to be your captain for 2 years? uh, I don't know. That one, I don't know. It's fascinating, and especially for a guy like you who likes looking at these, which is a great way to end things. RJ and Emerald City Hockey, him and Dylan, but I believe it's just you on the Armchair GM streams that you guys do. Your Patreon, you've got an Armchair GM stream on the 11th. So why don't you talk a little bit about the Patreon and anything you'd like to plug as we wrap up here?
That's right. So I could not wait after the Joey news, right? I wanted to do the Armchair GM in just a couple days. So that's right. On Patreon, that's patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey. We have a lot of cool bonus content for Kraken fans. One of those things is the Armchair GM stream that I do every month where I examine this kind of stuff in depth. I go into Ron Francis's shoes, see what the Kraken's potential options are, all that kind of thing. And good timing actually for the Patreon. We have the Armchair GM stream on Friday, and then also we have our ECH live commentary on Tuesday for the game against Nashville. And of course, you can sign up for the Patreon if you want to just check it out for free, see what it's all about. No risk whatsoever. You don't need to pay anything. There's a 7-day free trial you can sign up for. And if you do it now, in the next 7 days, we've got that Armchair GM stream, so you can join me for that. We can talk about the Joey extension, and you've got the live commentary on Tuesday. You can join us all for that. We watch the Kraken game together. We have a fun time. It's on YouTube. There's an interactive chat, and we all just hang out and have a good time. So now's a good time to give it a try. If you want to do that, it's at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey.
RJ, thank you for that. We'll get you out of here, and folks, you can go and watch that with them. Otherwise, RJ, I'll see you back. Well, we'll see you at Kraken practice tomorrow.
Yeah, see you tomorrow.
Hey, Charles.
Hey, Jen.
Hey. Where are you going to watch all those Kraken away games?
Kraken away games, making a push. I was thinking of coming here just because Rough and Tumble is the home of Circling Seattle Sports,
Only if that's okay with you.
I mean, I love that idea. Hope to see you here.